랑좀 저게 가서네 산이 점된디기 당보 동아 덴바디네 운주원 덴바디네 고대 람데 송샤스 기회 좀 제가 있는 당보 안에 운주원 덴바 기고를 디체리아 제부 안에 동아 덴바 기고레스 지사담 원내시나 당보 기회 그림바드 튠바지나 당보 운주원 덴바 셰티네 동아 덴바 송고월데 산이 점된디기 델레고 도제네 당보 동아 덴바 송지 운주원 덴바 송샤스디 dine son shahasana di kimjan karesana jiwarusina delaya tangbo sungu be kimjan delaya be nyamlen jebala nyamlen ne khabar cheyores tisa dine zang tangbo sungu ba de tangbo ngar zulya ne chi aje kasamna la karyorasne ne koyigi anche delaya anjuge koyu punzo delaya be ji jing rajing o dunga yimba chilya Dewa res be dewa zimba chiore di lo chinji lo res di aning lo di jesu zhangxi lega leba no zhe mong shu da dinigi an ko wale matar ba di ko wale ke dina ko ge wale ba dine cha go re dine za dangbo di dunga den ba da ha go res dine ha go wa ina ne dunga de la tar de ge sa ba chi gi res za dangbo dunga la ma dunga de la tar de ge sa ba gi go re za da 동아이 타르에 삼바께 발로 동아기 아니 귀인다 농고 의인이 수디 간에 힘을 하고 오레스티인자다 도마한 동아디만 송아레에서 어두시네 먼저 대시 쇼베디 이거 쉬어봐.
Good afternoon. So this morning we started to look at this outline showing why the truth of suffering is taught as the first of the Four Noble Truths. We saw that the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths in the specific sequence of true sufferings, true origins, true cessations, and true paths. And this doubt comes that the result is taught and then the cause. And this seems strange, this stands out. Surely the cause should be taught and then the result, in that true sufferings is the result of true origins, and likewise true cessations is the result of true paths. But as we saw this morning, the Buddha intentionally, specifically taught the Four Noble Truths in this specific sequence, because whilst it can be taught in the sequence of cause and effect for understanding, in terms of the order of practice, the order to put into practice, one needs to start with true sufferings. And we went on to look at that whilst the Buddha, or when the Buddha taught that true sufferings are to be known, this includes coming to know that samsaric happiness is actually a form of suffering, the suffering of transient happiness. It is not real happiness, in that it does not last. So this needs to be recognized, needs to be known, so that one can finally come to recognize that there is actually no happiness to be found in samsara. That as long as one experiences results of causes that are contaminated, one will experience suffering. This will lead to a wish for to be freed from the situation. And this wish to be freed or liberated from the situation comes about through understanding the reality of cyclic existence. Understanding that, for example, the happiness that we strive for and yearn for within samsara is not real happiness.
Dene rang dunga yi gyasur lungwa tongni dele tarpa ndebana dunga de do gwebar tonglas jizanda tonglas jizanda dene ge samdang yu dunga di gyasur lungwa tongni asida da nga yu gidi ina da jiga dunga janja kanga janja yu dige 내가버려 대화를 준수해네 다 강한 장자 유리 바래 시주 하고 그래서 제가 니네 통하고 통고래서 니네 통에도 아다 탈바 되바나 제가 탈바도 토구도 선배 삼로 리기래서 제가 탈바 토구도 선배 삼로에도 나 동아디 봐 도구 동아디 매봐 소고도 새벽에다 통고래서 하고 그래서 동아 de doko ba tonlas.
So returning immediately to the text where we concluded this morning. So the final paragraph on page 155, the third line down. Then when you see that you have fallen into the ocean of suffering and want to be liberated from it, you will see the need to counter suffering. So this is using the same analogy as we saw in the verse quoted above. So just like a person, a being who is in an ocean, their experience is pervaded by water, so too a being in samsara, their experience is pervaded by suffering. And that is the meaning of then when you see you have fallen into the ocean of suffering, that everything that you are surrounded by suffering, your experience is pervaded by suffering. Recognizing this, the line continues, you'll want to be liberated from this. No one wants to suffer. And recognizing that even our what we call happiness is merely a temporary respite of suffering. In the final part, you will see the need to counter suffering. So this comes from wishing to be liberated from it. You'll seek out the causes to counter.
some nadu chi shimju chi de ha wa de ne ta de ta ba to hu do sim bi sam na ke ta ta ba to hu sam bi ja sam ta de ta du nga di pa me ba so sam go ba du nga do hu ba to hu res de ne thong de da ane de yang sa gyu ma do na ane mi do ba shi ne es je za da ga sam go ro ne du nga di me ba so hu sam da ye de ta du nga di gyu di me ba ma sen da den du nga di yang ja da de ne ga me ba yang ji ye je za da dunga yungu de meba sogudu sembege hago to reje de den gyumado na mido para shine dunga mido para shine ne dene di jesu di yu and di yu di chitabo shi inyamdo kunjuan de ba shebar jebes de odo kunjuan de ba sonsos 제자다 dunga dogo de 제자다 dunga dogo ba dunga yungu de dogo gore dunga yungu kana shina서 제바 제두 제유 제바 제두 kunju tenpa da hagu kores, chisa dunga de yu le da nyomo pa di ya dasa maring pa di la jewa di hagu kore, chisa le da nyomo pa di da maring pa di da dunga yu di pa hagu kore, di hagu di da kunju tenpa hagu kores, kunju tenpa. Di enza da kunju tenpa dunga tenpa che su da kunju tenpa sung yu gyumzen di res, gyumzen sung do.
You see the end of in the text, the end of the second sentence shows the context we're in. The truth of suffering was taught first. So still, this is being presented why true suffering was presented first. So here, by reflecting on suffering, using similes such as the ocean of suffering, which is has no limit, when one reflects on suffering in a broad and expansive manner, not merely obvious suffering, but subtle levels of suffering, such as samsaric happiness. One comes to recognize that just like an ocean that is vast and appears endless, so too is samsara. And in these reflections, which need to be done in a personal manner, in relation to one's own lived experience, we come to recognize that from our own lived experience, how problems and difficulties seem to befall us. At certain periods, it's really apparent. Problem after problem after problem mounts upon us. We come to recognize that these are all karmic results, that this situation is endless or without limit. Until liberation from samsara is attained, this will continue to be our lived experience. In particular, when one is reflecting in great detail on suffering and seeing how, as one continuously is experiencing the ripening of contaminated karma. Therefore, these are subject to suffering. One recognizes just how pervasive suffering is for us. That will lead us to a deep yearning to change our situation, to, as the text says, counter suffering, to reverse our situation. Reading further. When you understand that, so understand that we are in this ocean of suffering and we will not, our situation will not change until we gain liberation. You will not counter suffering unless you counteract its causes. So through this reflection, we come to see that as long as the karma that ripens is contaminated, we will suffer. Therefore, the cause for our karma being contaminated, it's that needs to be counteracted. Therefore, we will seek out what the cause or the origin of our suffering is. The sentence continues, when you understand that you will not counter suffering unless you counteract its cause, you come to understand the truth of our origins, wondering what is the cause. So I'll just change the translation slightly. You'll come to understand the true truth of origins, wondering what is the cause. It's through wondering what is the cause of this ongoing perpetual suffering. That will lead one to understand it is the ignorance of self-grasping. And in this way, one comes to understand the cause of suffering. Kan jeg se det luk på impe? Det yugi tawo shigin nyamdu kunjo. Det kan luk på. Det luksa. Det hoktu kunjung tempa sungso. And then that is why the truth of origins was taught next. So in this block of text we've looked at, the second line we see, truth of origins was taught first. Now we come to a second part. That is why the truth of origins was taught next.
Ana dene ge kunju de basonwa res. Dene koyu dunga sachi yele da kunju de basi orwa da koyu gi dene koyu dunga sachi yele dang le di nyomo gi jishin de zawa da jin du shebe gi kunju de ba sheba jishin. Sina du chen da dunga yu gari ba ime jeba ju du she samda jeba je yodu ane dene koyu dunga gi dunga 네 사치기래 동아 규디다 사치기래 개위 사치기래다 레디야 아니 녀모의 규신 개바 계징 녀모디 자와라다 녀모데라 되샤다 공로용으로 되니게 녀모디야 되샤 공로라서 디 자와야 다스 마리바이 마리 다도 진비게 군중된 바시 다도 진비게 진마 마리바딘 바디 시그리스 지사한테 다도 진마 마리바디 군중의 자와 군주 대백인 자와 덴바딘바디 하고 그래서 되네 군주 덴바 똑백이 셰바 체마된 거 주기를 기고를 해셔라디
Lamrim Kappa continues and just made some changes to the translation, but the translation's fine, but just to try and make it a little clearer. That is why the truth of origins was taught next. You see that the suffering of cyclic existence is produced by contaminated karma, that those karmic actions are produced by mental afflictions, and that the root of the latter, the root of the mental afflictions, is grasping at a self. Then one such, maybe up to there. I'm going to read a little further. Then one such an understanding of the truth of origins has arisen. So here what is presented is the same, Lamrim Kappa writes, the same sequence that I've presented several times. So this needs to be very clear, that the suffering that we experience is due to a karmic ripening, and that karma, again, whether it's virtuous or non-virtuous, is contaminated. And the reason why the karma we've accumulated is contaminated is because the motivation that led to the accumulation of karma was afflicted. If afflictions were present. And whether there were a wide array of afflictions or just one, the root of all afflictions is our ignorance of self-grasping. That is the root cause. So therefore the sequence is the ignorance of self-grasping, leading to afflictions, leading to the accumulation of contaminated karma, leading to suffering experiences. This is the predicament. This is our situation. This is our reality.
Geshe le nganzu tangpo dunga di le samdang yi dunga di hawu res, dunga di ode dunga se di hawu re, dunga di ba hawu re, dunga di ba hawu re, dunga di ba di hawu re, dadi bang wu du senpe ki dele de tar wu du senpe tar du ke samba legi res, dine samla di ji res. 다 타두게 삼는 기인데 다디니 간스 매바 소고래 선배게 삼는데 제바 제도 어다디 유 가르레스는 귤리치 귤리티네 기고래 지다 유 가르레스 이제 유디라네 디 유요래 유디 매바 마선다 아니 고 매바 소토에 빠야 말에 지다 유디 매바 소고래 선배게다 둥아디면 유 매바 소고도 선배 삼을 레잉그레스 디네 삼는 숨바디 기고도와 디네 둥아디면 유 매바 소고도 선배 삼는 기도다 둥아디면 유디 간스레 가르레티네 기고래 선배 삼다이도 디네 레 사체게 레레 디네 깨와 하고 그랬어. 사체게 레 대야 아니 뇽몽베 규제 발에 디네 깨와 하고 그랬어. 대야 뇽몽베 대야 다 대샤 컨트롤라서 봐. 디에 야 자와 다지 마리바 임바데 하고 그랬어. 세상 디네 하고 해도 다 유군주 된바 동안되면 유군주 된바데 하고 셰바 똑베게 셰바데 기고 그랬어. 또 나디리도다 동안된 바 셰 당보 동안된 바 하고 대 동안된 하고 이제 동안된 바 텔레 동안된 매바 소고도 선배 텔레 타고도 선배 삼로지기 근데 타고도 선배 삼는 게 돼. 디간스 동안된 바 간스 타고를 간스 지지스데 어다고 유여고 유매바 말 유지여래 선배게 동안된 바 유여바 하고 그랬어. 다 유여바 하고도 유디 가르에서 제바지도 레다 뇽모바 대야 다스 마리바 임바 하고 그랬어. 제자 군주된 바디야 데네스 하고 그랬어. 두시나 삼블마선 두시나 림바 계산 되는 기고 그랬어.
So the sequence again is this. First, the first noble truth, Buddha said, true sufferings need to be known. When one comes to know, to recognize, to understand the pervasiveness of suffering, of our suffering experiences, then that will naturally lead for the wish for liberation from this situation to arise, or to be freed of suffering. This will arise. So we've had the first noble truth. The truth of suffering was taught first, because one needs to recognize the reality of our situation, because we are living in, in the darkness of ignorance in relation to our actual situation. When those veils of ignorance have been lifted in relation to suffering, and we come to recognize just how pervasive our situation is, just how desperate our plight is, we'll wish for liberation from suffering. So the first step, suffering needs to be known. That leads to a wish to be liberated from suffering. That we can call the second step. Wanting to be liberated from suffering, we will seek out the cause of our suffering, or the origin of our suffering. And that we will know to be contaminated karma, ripening in our various experiences, and that karma is contaminated because it's accumulated with a motivation, with afflictions present. Therefore, the karma is contaminated. Therefore, that karma will keep us bound in samsara. Moreover, these afflictions have as their root the ignorance of self-grasping. So this then is the sequence which leads to this final point of where true origins are understood. The origins to our suffering is understood. Starting again, just to repeat it, suffering to be known leads to a wish to be free from suffering. That needs to be understood deeply so that one recognizes there's nothing worthy of striving for, being excited about within samsara. No lasting happiness can be found here. That leads to the wish for liberation, the second part. Then one seeks out the cause, the third part. And that cause, we need to also come to recognize this relationship between contaminated karma and the afflictions with the ignorance of self-grasping as their root. When this is truly known, then true origins are understood.
안다데 데니게 다시 마리바디 자위뉴모 단 자와임바디 하고 그래서 당한저 삼로 라바라바 스타메네 데네리와 당한 삼다나 지능한 줄려가 가르치베네 당보 안주게 당보 승화줄려 나세 삼주 코르제 데네 nga se samlo ko di jela ne nga khala sa hudu se jeli do dro hudu se nga ki she hudu nga dro hudu dene nga mi tu hudu se da oda ngai jala se da ngai khangpa se da chine li go wa dang bo ko so nga se samlo li yung go re sa di jela da ngai se di li yung ra di je san kare chebe na di li do sa di ne za da do chine dang bo 맞아 녀모바 탐제기에 규자와디 나세 마리바 이마다 하고 우리 에세시티 스물하다.
So I've said now several times that the ignorance of self-grasping is the root of all the afflictions. So from the ignorance of self-grasping, all the other afflictions follow. And action follows, or karma is accumulated. So to present this then on a course level, a level that's easy to understand, we need to come to recognize that at the very center of all our thoughts is ourselves, our sense of self, our I, our self. So this is central to our entire thought process, and from this follows further thoughts and action. So for example, I am sitting. I want to go somewhere. I want to go somewhere and I want to eat something. I want to go somewhere and I want to talk to someone. That I want to go somewhere and I want to talk to someone who is my friend. So we have this sequence of events, single events, several events, always in the center. And the center of this is I. I want this, I want that. I do not want this, I do not want that. And coming with this I is also the mine, my friend, my home, and so forth.
빵 투위네 메나고 가네신나 셈비다 심주치 할리고다 디디 가스네 다신 대양세 더 뉴스 통화나 네 동아가 벽고 오늘 자와 이 담차와 디오도 고텐 손소 어시도와 지자 데네자 데네기 다신 말이 봐도 빵 투구 있나 메나 빵 투구 투구래 투구 말에 세디 어디 심주지해야 돼요. 심주지기로 해서 심주지해야 될 이거 같다. 내내기 심주지해야도 다디 다음에 또 얘기 내내기 심주지해네 다음에 또 고려 되지 공도 셰바 나지래. 제사다 내내 심주지해야도 값이 다음에 또 두고 하실 돈이 또 용거래. 제사 용거 되네. 내내야 다시 록다게 용루와 내내데 어도스 노트샤에게 되디 용거래. 요사데 되네 삼다들 이거 와다. 제사 록다게 용거래. 제사 다음에 봐 유튜브로 다 세들로 들라 가는 낭두는 제바 제도 다 다화래 샤샤다 다 민두샤다 네 록다게 다 민두세 록다게 되는 용거로 와다. 제사 디디 값보다 되는게 다도 지금 다신 본 누구디 누구 민두세베 삼다에도 제사 다신디 가니시에세 소수게 다세데 로래야 가는 샤고도 샤와나신 짐바디 짐바나신 돈을 두게 다디 샤와 르파 짐바나신직 다디 돈을 두게 민두 셰바 지고로와 되네 제바 제네 네 제바 집이 내가 차여도 되네 다음에 또 봐도 디군 거래서 다신 제야 또 뉴스 통화나 되네 다음에 또 여도 되네 어다 다신 빵 투구도 셈베게다 그래서 다신디 템버 그래서 다 짐바나신 민두 제가 콜로 록시르샤 제가 디네자 코 님보 다 다음에 봐도 로디 공부했는데 코빵 투부도 셈베게다 도 뉴스 통그리에서 빵 투구여 봐도 디네 신이 하고 그래 제래 도 뉴스 통화나 통그리에서 디베 다진야 도 뉴스 통화나 세대다 디네게 고 심주제 디네 제바 심주제도 디네 고 다디 르 나와 나신 다가라에서 짐바 나신 매바도 돈라 매바 통용도 다 다음에 봐 동방이 또 거와 또 되다 어다 다신데 어다 방투부도세 방투서래 셈비다 곧 거는 님보여 봐도 하고 거래 지산 통해도 되고 바 뉴바디 방도 뉴바디 통고래세.
Continuing with the text, and again I've just made some slight changes. Just for clarity, the translation is not wrong. Then once such an understanding of the truth of origins has arisen. So just to be clear, what is this understanding of the truth of origins? From the ignorance of self-grasping come our array of afflictions, and whatever karma we accumulated, whether virtuous or non-virtuous, is contaminated, and therefore we continue to suffer. So once such an understanding of the truth of origins has arisen, and you see that grasping at a self can be countered. So this is a key part here. You see that grasping at a self can be countered. So this word, see, is the word for seeing. It's also the word in the part, I'm just saying it now as a translator. The word for seeing here is also the word for seeing, it's the word in the path of seeing. It can also mean to realize. So I say that, and now on to Geshe's explanation. So this is a key section here. You see that grasping at a self can be countered. So this seeing, we should understand, means it's not just an intellectual understanding, but it's when one knows with vivid clarity. This understanding, this seeing, has a transformative impact on you. I can break free from this. There is a solution, and it is attainable. I can attain it. So this is key. And it is similar to before with suffering. Suffering needs to be known, not just understood intellectually. One needs a visceral response to give rise to a wish for liberation. So too here, recognizing, I can gain this liberation. You see that grasping at a self can be countered. That, and then it continues, you commit yourself to actualize the cessation that puts a stop to suffering. This is why the truth of cessations was taught next. What is go around? There. So in this part here, where you come to see that grasping at a self can be countered, and you commit yourself to actualize the cessation that can be the cessation puts a stop to suffering. This is where then one will seek out seek out reality, come to understand then how the I does exist, come to try and understand selflessness. This is the point, though, where mistaken understandings, one can come to mistaken understandings or come to a wrong view. So this is the point of some danger.
Nyomba doesn't marry bang tugudu doesn't marry ban dimanaji mindu sembe dameba to that kitchen even sometimes that go bang tugudu bangba do se taba yoba didi 통과하다 taba yoba 통과해 제자 taba yoba 제자 디네게 다음에 마도나 taba 먼저 taba 요래서 칸에 발라바다 켈린 바자마도 돈당 우만들 하 세명에 두고 말다 디네게 심주 제제 다음에 바도 또 또 안에 되는 게 신기반에 양자 삼지 땅에도 오다 타르바도 세베 다 동안 영어바 빵바 고딘도 세베 타르 통과를 해제 통화나 동안 고가비게 고방운도 고바세다 통을 봐제 통마자 다디 냠렌체나 톱투구도 세베 고방운도 자와디 통고도 톱투고도 통고 봐서 되니다 담차를 해서 담차와서 나다와리도와 담차와라는 대발에 담차와선 나다와리도 지난 니네 통에도 당의 고바도 곡된데 톱을 지긴 인생백이 켈린 담차고래 켈린지고래 담차외 되네게 연구를 해서 제자 디인자 디월야다 동아디보 군주된비월 고된 시급비김된디리 해서 제바디리 해서 제자 동아 군주된바 다진 마릭바디 파 심주 전에 그 로셰 코빵 뉴바 통요디 아니 고된디 가소래 통요디 아니 고된 동안 코빵뉴스 통과래 빵 뉴바 통요디 아니 고님어 빵베 빵보 고된 요바 통과래 고된 도바 통도 오다 통사반자 당해디 토바지긴스베 켈렌 담자디 고레스 대인자 아니 고바 셰바디고 고방문도 자세디 고봉은 지긴 토벌 지긴 세베게 삼로 담자리 작 담차고래 담자리고래서 대행상 동안 군주팀 미첼이야 고된시하고 김천디리에서
So just looking again at this crucial part, second line, you see that grasping at a self can be countered. This is absolutely key. Through having heard many teachings and now coming to recognize that the ignorance of self-grasping can be eliminated. And when it is eliminated, liberation is immediately attained. Freedom from all the sufferings of samsara will be attained. One will abide in lasting, stable happiness. When one comes to recognize that this is truly possible for me, then one comes to commit oneself, or the translation is to vow, but one comes to commit oneself to actualize the cessation that puts a stop to suffering. So the key point that is being made in this part that is being covered again here is that by the time a practitioner has reached this level, they've heard these teachings many times, come to a good understanding of them, but having come to see for themselves, their understanding now is no longer intellectual or theoretical. They have seen for themselves. And that power leads them to make a heartfelt commitment to striving to put for the cessation that puts a stop to suffering. This becomes their dominant attitude in life. This promise, this vow, this commitment. I will gain freedom. I will gain freedom from samsara.
도시 제가 동아대 받을 송아래세 디바 가서 고된 송아래세.
So that is why, this final sentence, this is why the truth of cessation was taught next. So at the start of this large paragraph, we had the reason why true sufferings was presented first, then we had why true origins was presented, and now at the very last sentence in this paragraph, why true cessations is taught third.
제가 대지는 다신 대양 도누스 통하나 아니 세디 디가서 다신 세대 다신 말이바 아주 군중 대비 조규소 다신 말이바 제바 제도 아니 될이야 아니 따위 남샤 다음에 봐 통해대 따위 남샤 시고로 와 제가 디 따와 디 내가 소다 두신 따와 소속에 다음에 봐 고탕에 통해 니네 아주기 베네 남발이네 베네 제라마와다 되대와다 셈자마다 나 우마라디바 우마 태기바 세야데 좀데 네 카가가 차와디 디 내가서 따와 디 캐바게 소소랑 고위게 따와를 지게도 따위 톤에 캐바시기를 마도 다 고카 좀다 하래서로와 마도 제베 톤에 잠니제 고미야다 진바다 주른서가 준르 고미야 신의 주비야 디토라 캐바지가요 마 지지부지게 하셔서 추좀 송고야 진바다 냠네 쇠베 냠네 전주 좀 보야 아니 신의 주고 지부지게 하래 캐바가요 마셔서 주다 지부지게 하러 와 될 줘봐 매래 녀라 디천에 캐바시 카가 차고 말을 카가 차야지 다 다음에 봐 따와서 니도 디가서다 가시게 다음에 라바로 니 가시 참원이가 가시게 될 신신도 차와되 니도 되는 게 따위 토네 되네 좀다 카가 차와로 와 대 배낭아주게 나버된 치바세대나 치료받은 아주게 다 되네네 이권주네 진바땅은 냠는 제하다 세번 냠는 제하 근데 지게 잠니죠 고미야 지바로 와다 최종 건설미 샘제 지가리네 진비 냠는 제거야다 근데 지 시안이야 내가 제목을 수름 송고야 되게 송고를 죄배 차네 가가 차고 말에 다 조다 가르스네 나가주게 따와기 다음에 봐 디톤에다 정말 당은주기 낭비게 다음에 봐 케이팅한테 따와드는 작업으로 또 공주게다 다 세야지 다디 라신 주바리 대템버 주바리 다 딱바리 스테이션도 지지 딱바리 따와디 디톤다 나발 치바세디 캐바체 작업을 치 나발의 지나에 캐바샤디야 따위 톤에 지금 거래 한지 능륜 겸로되네 시고래 강주게 따위 권에 여와치다 직제 점주권의 여와치다 직제 최고를 점주들은 저기 단 남바이나 개비유들의 개숨 제거로 산유고를 최고제 기준 거죠. 디 인지미지 숨 창고고 디마 숨과 케일링 거고 와데 숨 케멜레나 Digo ma de sumba keling go re ta现在呢样子咪也过去几步嘛都keling go也的几步嘛都keling go嘛了的呢在的能亲게 개발쳐야 대외권에 개발치다 용 거래 근데 이제 점주권에 개발쳐봐 용 거래 진짜 좋은 거 이제 너무 지다셔야 돼 점주권에 개발치고 그래 점주권에 개발
So staying in the same paragraph at the top of page 156, you see that the grasping at the self can be countered. So this is when, at this point, one engages in the meditation on the various, or on at least one of the Buddhist philosophical presentations of reality. In this way, one comes to recognize that self-grasping is a consciousness of ignorance, not a consciousness of wisdom. In other words, it's contrary to reality. So here, for the practitioner, on one hand, a particular practitioner will be practicing this in the same way as every other Buddhist at this point, but in another way, they will be practicing in a way of only a select number of Buddhists. So at this point, they will be primarily looking at the presentation on philosophical views. And that can be in accordance with any of the Buddhist tenets, or the Vaibhashika, the Sautrantika, the Chittamatra, and the two Madhyamakas, Vajjantika and Prasangika. Here there is quite some difference in terms of subtlety on the view of reality. The practitioner will also certainly be engaging in other practices, and this will be in common with all other Buddhist practitioners, those of generosity, ethics, patience, joyous perseverance, and concentration. There isn't difference in terms of view. But practitioners here, some will be meditating on a coarser presentation of selflessness, such as that of the Vaibhashika or Sautrantika, or a subtler presentation, such as that of the Chittamatrans or even the Svatrantikas, or the subtlest presentation, that of the Prasangika. So here in terms of view, there is some difference in terms of subtlety. But in terms of the other practices the practitioner will engage in, these will be common across all Buddhists. And then between Buddhists and non-Buddhists, usually a difference is presented as being one of refuge. Buddhists necessarily go to protecting refuge to the three jewels. So a Buddhist stands out from non-Buddhists because a Buddhist turns to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha for protection, goes there for protecting refuge. And non-Buddhists will go probably to their God or whatever their religion presents. And between Buddhists and non-Buddhists, in terms of refuge, there's quite some difference. In other areas of practice, there's a lot of similarity or commonality. Religions, Buddhist and non-Buddhist, encourage acts of generosity, the cultivation of love and compassion and so forth. So there's quite some similarity there. But where the second area where there's difference, not the first was that in terms of refuge, the second is in terms of view. So between Buddhists and non-Buddhists, there is a great difference, really a great difference in view. Buddhists present selflessness. Non-Buddhists will present that the self does exist in a way that is unchanging, whereas Buddhists will not accept that. Even the coarsest of Buddhist views will not accept that. So in general, when we differentiate Buddhists and non-Buddhists, we will talk about refuge. But you can also talk about view, because the view is also greatly differentiated between Buddhists and non-Buddhists. And in other terms of practice, there is a lot of commonality, such as love, compassion, generosity, and so forth.
That dinegi gotin that sumating of a yumsenje. That delia jiwa chili gore, dewa harli orsene, says Dunga Dimba said to Tony do Dunga Dimba Tony do, that Gunyo Dimba Matoniele, Dunga Dimba how going to, that Dunga de la Tar would be Tarba Dunia some gig to us, just that dinner, then dinner and got in dinner to us actually or some word that Jewish deliver. One asa 다디 지워데다 오나 두딘 템바나 타발라 되바 게베스 제산 두딘 땡제 동어기 두딘 땡 동어이 니스케들 된 동아들에 타고도 세비게 탈베 삼로 타바지 톱디게 삼로디 기기도 와서 기기도 와서 제다다 다디 가라스네 안주게 당보 동아데 디네 군주데 디네 고텐 땡디 똑베게 삼로 따라 냠랭이 좀 로율에 기위 김정기 되는 심바진도 송와래 송을 와다 다 되네 인나서도 그 지고 가르던 거라서 되네 동아 파텐서도 동아 통요도 되네 동아들 타고도 선배 삼로 기기도 와서 제가 타바도에 삼로 기기도 와서 제가한테 타바도에 삼게 받아 군중기 삼로 많이 년에 타바도에 삼로 기기도 제가한테 고텐텐데 기기도 와서 그러다 동아 템바나 동아 두딘 템바나 타바 되바 게베스 제자다 동아기 오도 고딘 템바릭소스 제자 동아 템바데 되네 고딘 템네 디그리에서 그러다 디그리 와서 디거지리다
Now, Lama Tsongkhapa continues to present why the Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths in this order, and he does so again by presenting another doubt. And the doubt is this. The Buddha taught the Four Noble Truths in this particular sequence because this is the sequence of practice. So that you've said. So therefore one starts on meditating on true sufferings, and when suffering is known, one really recognizes how our samsaric experience is pervaded by suffering. The very next thought is, I want to be liberated from this. I want suffering to cease. So if that is the very second step, why did the Buddha not teach true cessation second, if that is the order of practice? So this then is expressed, reading from the text. Someone might think, well then, as the wish for liberation arises when the truth of suffering is presented, it would make sense to present the truth of cessation after the truth of suffering.
나 데네 두신다 쥐메데렌데레 쥐메데스 쥐메데 디체 둥아시유 고바라 톱나 냠베 타드 예장사 데네게 삼로 기고래 제래 쥐요 말레스 데네게 담보 삼로 디스기고 데네다 고틴도 숨바테 바들레 쥐요 말레스 다 디가 소소다 쥐메데 디체 시데 둥아이지 남자도 삼다데 데 둥아시유 고바디 딱 둥아디 시고도 공아 시위에 도 고바 톱나 선배게 삼로 지기고래 타바 톱나 타바 되니지 기고래 타바 되지 타바 도고 되고래 삼로디 기고래 이내야 타바 톱나 삼고할 때야 코로나 지워있다는 타바 톱나 삼고 코로나 타바 톱고 레베 도고 말해라네 근데 하고요 말했어요. 그래서 타바 코로나 통요 말와 또요 말와 뭐도 이거 톱나 삼배는 미주었는 코로나 간에 톱고래 타바 간에 지워래서네 하고요 말해서 신이 와다 가신다 토고에는 토요에는 맨날 선배 신이 태좀기기로 와. 그래서 코로나 타바 톱나 선배기 삼로시 기기리 타바 되비게 삼로시 기기리 위 되장 기기리 해제래. 이나 가르치고 말해서 누가 윤주 뭐 말씀지 누가 유 군주인 템바 다신 말이 빠다 하고요 말했어. 말씀지 템 하모래 데 하모와서 규디 도 뉴스 마통에 규디 안에 파빵 투구여 받다 토고 말했어. 마통와서 고봉문도 자오 년비게 탈바 저 탈바라 톱제 미진비치스. 그래서 당이 탈바 톱우도 선비게 당이 톱과 지긴 선비 삼로 용어 말했어. 탈바 톱나 섬고할 때 삼고 삼바지 용고할 때 이내다 타바 오다 디레시 안에 다 톱을 지긴 선비 삼로도 용어 말해야지. 어디라
So again, I'll just read from the beginning. Someone might think, well then, as the wish for liberation arises when the truth of suffering is presented, it would make sense to present the truth of cessation after the truth of suffering. Then Lama Tsongkhapa replies to that doubt. However, there is no fault. Even though at that point the wish for liberation is present in the form of the thought, if only I'd achieved cessation, the pacification of suffering. So in other words, the reply is, what you're saying is correct. And Geshe has said this now several times before. After you really come to recognize suffering, the immediate thought is, I want to be free of this. And as Lama Tsongkhapa expresses it here as, if only I'd achieved the cessation, the pacification of suffering. It was just like any time we feel suffering, we want to be free of it. We wish we were not suffering. We wish that this had not befalled us. So yes, that is what will happen. Then it continues. So you could say a but. You have not identified the cause of suffering and do not see that the cause can be countered. So here Lama Tsongkhapa points out that whilst yes, it's true, you have, when you realize true sufferings, a general desire to be free of suffering does arise. But you have still not understood the cause of that suffering. And if you have not understood the cause of suffering, you do not really know whether you can eradicate that cause and thereby gain freedom from suffering. So that's then mentioned here. Therefore, and the text continues, therefore, and I can just change it slightly, you do not apprehend liberation as something to be attained, thinking, I must actualize cessation. So because of not having understood the cause of suffering and thereby recognize what the cause is and it can be countered, you haven't really given rise to this thought of, I must actualize cessation, as opposed to, if only I'd achieved cessation. So these two ways of thinking about, I wish I wasn't suffering, I wish this hadn't occurred, are very different.
다 동아 견데 통하도 동아를 타고도 선배 동아를 타르피 타고도 타바 토고도 선배기 삼로디 기요레스 이내야 타바디 동아를 뒤에 타바딩이 토벌 지인 선배기 토벌 지인 선배 켈린 남자들 리고 말레스 켈리고 말레스 다 켈린 남자들 말레와데 가르친 리고 말레베 김장 가래 랍나 제사다 군주인 뎀바 저 다세 마릭바디 통요디 빵뉴바디 하고 또요 말레스 마토바 인상 안나 고텐 미 토벌 지긴 세베게 남자디 네투고 말레스 말레바 인상 안디데스 제사다 다 데니 남자디 게딜레게 랍나 군주 뎀바 또지 군주 뎀비 다세 마리바디 파 제바체 델야 제바체제 디뽕 뉴바 다메바 또 차려도 디뽕 뉴바 통요도 통고레스 뽕 뉴바 통요도 데니 군주 뎀바 또네 데 뽕 뉴바 통요도 데니 신에다 다음에 고바디 토발 지긴 세베 고봉 운도 지긴 세베 남자디 켈린 리고레스 디인자 군주 뎀비게 데니 켈린 삼로디 군주 뎀바 또베 제수 용구요바 인자 안에 군주 뎀바디 군주 뎀베 제알이야 고된 수마레스 올다
When it's just say, as the translator, as I repeat what Geshe said, it's about these same lines, but also we'll reference what's in the paragraph above in the third line. So this person is asking the doubt, is correct that when true sufferings are known, when one recognizes how one's samsaric experience is pervaded by suffering, it's like, and one recognizes that one is trapped in this ocean of suffering, and up to this point has never even recognized one was in an ocean, and now finally one sees one wishes, if only I was not in this ocean of suffering, if only I had achieved cessation, if only I was not suffering. This is then the second thought. But one has not yet developed the strength of mind of, looking at the top of the page, where you commit yourself or you vow to actualize the cessation, because you don't know it's possible. You do not yet know it's possible. So you haven't yet committed yourself, you haven't yet given rise to the thought of, I must actualize cessation. That strength of mind is lacking. Your wish that I wasn't suffering, that's certainly strong. But the strength of commitment, I commit myself, I must actualize suffering, I must actualize cessation, this has not arisen. And why has it not arisen? Because one has not yet understood that the origin of suffering can be eradicated. One needs to come to understand that self-grasping is an ignorance. It's not a mind in accordance with reality. And that's the first. Self-grasping is an ignorance because it's not in accordance with reality. And then secondly, and that by developing the understanding of selflessness, which is in accordance with reality, that wisdom is contrary to ignorance and can eradicate ignorance. So in other words, when one recognizes that I can develop this wisdom that will eradicate that ignorance and thereby bring about a cessation to suffering, that is the point when you commit yourself to actualizing the cessation that puts a stop to suffering. Or as it says later, I must actualize cessation.
안제자 데니 데터러서 데니기 토바 지긴 셈페 켈린 담자디 두 토바 지긴 셈페 용고 말스 제자 데터러 탈바 고바 운도 자오 님도 짐바나 시데 짐바디다 기딜리그레스네 데주슈바나신 덴진 마리바 다음에 봐또 살리고래 덴산 로스드 데니게 다 타바디 운도 자오 셈페 타발리고레스 디 데터는다 데네 디젤라 가리스네 딜주베 람가이 냔도 람델라 주베 람딘 타마르 송소스 제자다 고방운도 지긴 고방운도 지긴 세베다 고바 토바 지긴 세베 켈린 담잘레도 데네 삼로 갈리게스네 오다카 화데 가네스 제호도 가네스 토보도 셈비게 제바제리로 와다 토비에게 탑람제리로 탑람제도 다 람딘 어디 람디고 말했더니 뭐래서 람냠네 좀 보고미야디 딜리고다 진짜 디네자 람디네 탐바송 말이야지 대삼로 따나게 레이도 고든 톱 선배 토여도 다 고든 토여야 탑람디 카르카레세 시디 삼다이도 람디하고 람디 말하고 그래서 진짜 디네자 하고선 다 람디니 냠네 제고도 선배 삼레도 디네 람데라 주베에서 데 람데 타마송 와리에서 딘시나데 람데네 타마송에도 김전디리에서 다 딘시 숭비 고림 림바 숭고비 고림 숭다 데네제 담보 동아데마 데네 군주데마 데네 고텐데 람딘 두심바 두숭와레 숭고비 김전 안 소소 냠는 집에 갑려야 로려야 림바 예상 림바데 튠바딘데 숭와레에서 두숭와르다
So starting where we just finished in the middle of the paragraph, therefore you do not apprehend liberation as something to be attained, thinking, I must actualize cessation. So when you have trained in the way the Buddha taught, by meditating on true sufferings, and then origins, and then recognize that the origin of suffering is an ignorance, which means by cultivating a wisdom, I can apprehend it. Then the text continues in that manner. So in that manner, when one now understands that cessation is possible, once you apprehend liberation and think, I must actualize cessation, you will engage the truth of the path. So here, when one is meditating the way presented, first one will give rise to this wish, I don't want to suffer anymore. I want to be free of suffering. But then one hasn't really recognized, come to see for oneself why one is suffering. Then when one meditates on the origin and recognizes this origin is an ignorance, and then you recognize this is an ignorance, this is the origin, then you go to the meditation on the third truth, coming to recognize that by cultivating a wisdom, I can eradicate it. This then leads to with this recognition that it can be done, and it can be done by me. This is possible for me. It's within my grasp. So this comes with the third truth, the true cessations, recognizing I can do this. It is entirely possible. That then leads to the fourth truth. You will engage in the truth of the path. So here you see I can gain cessation, bring it to an end. How to do so? What is the path that I need to cultivate, the mental paths I need to cultivate to bring about a cessation of suffering? You will engage in the truth of the path wondering. What is the path leading there? So what are the mental paths to cultivate that lead to cessation of suffering? The final sentence. That is why the truth of the path was stated at the end. So now in these two large paragraphs, the four truths have been presented, and it's been explained for each why they're presented in that particular sequence. Why the second followed the first, and why the second was followed by the third and followed by the fourth. That was explained as presented in the order to practice. And how then to meditate, how to practice, has now been briefly presented.
Dene dungan ni so hago yende ani de samlo de kharli gesine o da dungan de le matha dan thamne dungan de le thargo du sempege samlo ke yongures de ki yode dene dungan yi gyu ani kharre sene shgyul ya shimju che yende ani du le da nyomo ba dene da se mare ba kunju yi ba da hago gures de ren ba ni ba de che du chi na hago da kunju da hago yode o da kunju de ba da se mare ba pang tugu de tugu mindu sempege da che ba che li gures 다트 제바 제리에도 되네 마 제바 제도다 되네 제바 제네 제바 제알에 양주게 된되게 남자 삼다 정도 다음에 봐도 제바 제로 되네 제바 제 간점 지리야 아니 뭐디 다세 마리 바디 네빵 투구여 바디 하고 또 그래스 다빵 투구여가 또 어디 되네 신의 다세 마리 빵배 빵버여 고된 탈와여 바또 그래스 탈와여도 또 어디 하고여도 오다다 다다 타바도 두 스타디 마톰네 탑민도 셈베게다 타바 토비 동예기 이 토벌 지긴 셈베게 남자의 켈리지 리고레스 어디 리고레스 다디니 고텐 토브도 고텐 예요 오늘 자고 셈베 삼 리기레스 다디니 고봉문이 자고 딱 고텐 토구도 셈베 삼 땅에도 다디 간에서 토고레 탑람 가네 그 베지 땅고레 디 토블라에 토베라 삼 가르지 고레 셈베 삼 땅에도 다 람냠는 제고바 하고 람딜레tin 토고바 돼 하고 그래서 제가 되네게 하고 그래서 제가 되네 하고에나 누시네 삼 땅에도 림바 하고 탄데 두 사고 그래서 제가 디 삼로 림바 또바 기타디 또바 온도 람냠는 림바 기타 림바 디 두스키 그래제래
So what you covered in these two paragraphs really is important, because all practitioners, those who are committed to attaining freedom, will train in this way. They will train in this way. They won't follow their own wishes or desires, but they will train in the way guided, starting with meditating on true sufferings, meditating on the threefold division of suffering, coming to recognize the pervasiveness of suffering for samsaric beings, leading then to a wanting to be free of suffering, or as it's said here, that if only I'd achieved cessation, the pacification of suffering. So reflecting on suffering leads to the thought, if only I wasn't suffering, if only this could be brought to an end. Then one then links from their true sufferings to seeking out the cause of suffering, recognizing that suffering is a result, it comes from a cause. One seeks this out, looking at true cessations, true origins, looking at that the sequence that our suffering experiences are a ripening of contaminated karma. That karma is contaminated because it was accumulated by an afflicted motivation, and that afflicted motivation has as its root the ignorance of self-grasping. This sequence, this origin of our suffering, when it is truly known, the thought will come, can this be eliminated? And when one recognizes, comes to see that the ignorance of, that self-grasping is an ignorance, one understands that being an ignorance, a contrary consciousness of wisdom can be cultivated, in particular, the wisdom realizing selflessness. So this is when we come to recognize that grasping at a self can be countered. And this is then when, now to moving into true cessations, you commit yourself to actualize the cessation that puts a stop to suffering. So this commitment, where one commits oneself, one develops this pervading thought, I must actualize cessation. This comes through recognizing this is possible, and it is possible for me. That then leads into, so let me make this happen. Let me seek out the means by which to bring an end to suffering. to gain freedom, to cultivate the required mental paths. And thereby, one seeks out the paths that need to be cultivated and strives earnestly to develop the paths in the way that one is guided. So this then is the order to practice in this specific sequence in order to gain the desired goal, lasting, stable happiness.
아주 냠는 제발라 냠는 지단이 림바디 신고에데 예체모 차고 제자 당보 동아된 바삼다 너는 군주에 된바 고된 대 남는도 신 림바두스야 선배게 방람디 신고거래 제자디 예체모 차고 제자다 림바 신여다 되네 신이네 되네 냠는 제타디 가르가리 가네스 동아된 베갑려야 삼다나 가네스 당고래 군주에 된베가 삼다가다 두신다 제바 삼다나디 바림바 디시 티니된 제고래 제대다 신고에 차 예체모 차고래 근데 제가 동아된바데 제가 되니기 소수게 당보 군주 동아된바 삼다 되는 군주에 된바 되는 고된데 람된 두세는 냠레림바도 시월다 세데 냠레림바디 야네야도 퇴제 파섬려야 방림르티 디디세에 젤야네 당보 동아된바 삼다다 되네 삼당 고르세 동아된바 삼다다 하고 되네 디젤 군주 된바 세디 모여송 되니기 디삼다다 샤두 신림바진 다 당보 방림데 하고 와제 방림데 하고네 되네 심바 에심바 삼다다데 하고 와제 디지다 지자다 디 당보 동아데 마삼다데 먼저 동아 곰바시고래 동아 곰바 군중 곰바 내 고된 곰바 남녀 곰바시고 디곰 곰세데 다디 먼저 곰나네 조홈나 지금 이게 나네 지홈데 시고래 제 지홈 제가 동아 곰바시데 동아야 지홈 지고래서 지홈 지스도 동아데 바트카네시 시데고 юм제 삼다 디고 심주체 제바체데 삼다데 지홈 시고 제자데 동아데 곰바시 데마도 동아데 곰바시 제지도 미네 곰바데 말해 제가 동아데 군주 템바 곰바 고된 고 남된 곰시티 먼저 다디디 지홈 시고 다데 남된 레도 조금 모네디다 남된 야 다음에 어떤 말이 또 하지 되는 신의 주변 지주네 봐 남된 데라 조금 나 지금 네가 용 거 남된 곰바데라 다 동아데 곰야던 고 남된 곰 군주 템바 곰세다 동아데 군주 템바 곰 고된 곰세디 다시 디수 지홈 장야래 맞아 조금 봐요 말해 남 지홈 장야 람된 곰바들라 람된 레스도 다 람된레 지홈지기로와 지홈제 아니 되네 아니 지홈제에 용거 지주니비다 당 동반이 또 사네 동반이를 지주니비 보면요로다 지홈지 진진리로와 다다다 정도 동아 곰보 군주도 보고 고된 곰 람된 곰세 지홈지 시고래 라 지홈 람된 동아된 보고 람 군주 템바곰 람데 가서 고된곰 람데곰 세디 기시에데 두스곰 버림바셰도와 디 지곰 기시월다 지곰 제바 제다다
So we've presented here the order of practice that we need to engage with the Four Noble Truths. Thereafter, the text will start to present details in relation to the various truths. So first, the sequence is presented. What the sequence is and why it is like that. And then one comes to a presentation firstly on true sufferings in some detail, and thereafter a detailed presentation also on true origins. So the reason why it's presented in this way, first with presenting the sequence and then detail, is so as to encourage the student to meditate in the correct sequence, not just to follow their own wishes, not to follow what they enjoy most, they are more drawn towards, but to follow in the way that will lead to the desired result. And if one understands the broader context, now through understanding why true sufferings first, and then true origins, then true cessations, and then true paths, if one understands that broader context, then when we come next to look at true sufferings in detail, we'll understand why we're talking about all the sufferings of samsara in such detail, because we'll understand the broader context. It will make sense, and we will apply ourselves to cultivating these realizations within. So these meditations that will be led are all analytical meditations. It's not just trying to settle the mind, calm the mind, but thinking, using reasoning, coming to recognize the actual situation we're in, our own real lived experience. It's only much later that one comes to do placement meditation or single-pointed concentration. The vast majority of meditation until then, well, not the vast majority, the entirety of the meditation one does until much further in our training is analytical. And analytical, again, this means thinking, analyzing, using reasoning. Certainly, the meditation on true sufferings, this is all analytical. The meditation on true origins is all analytical. And coming to initially recognize true cessations, so the recognition as presented here, not an actual cessation, that too is analytical. When we come to true paths, that too will all be analytical until one gains an initial realization of emptiness. Only then does one develop single-pointed concentration. And with single-pointed concentration, one develops single-pointed concentration and develop a path. All the meditations until then are analytical. Coming to recognize for oneself our mistaken conceptions, coming to recognize for oneself the pervasive nature of suffering, giving rise to the wish for freedom, seeking out the origin, analyzing, coming to see for oneself that the theory of the sequence of contaminated karma coming from afflictions, coming from ignorance, that is true, and giving rise to that recognition, and I can gain freedom from this. And then cultivating the understanding of emptiness. All of that is analytical meditation.
On this samnata de dini samdade tambo soso ranrange tendo dunga demba se de phumbo soso de samdango re jesan soso phumbo di dunga demba de soso phumbo de ya samdang du dunga demba ha ko wa che dene soso phumbo dunga demba de ki yu kunju yin ba da ko wa che dene kunju da se mari ba se de da bang tu de mu de je ba che dene ju je bang tu yo ba de ha ko dene ani da golden tu yo ba da golden tu yo ba de ha ko de nene di ngānsu du samdādi da du shine samdāyare. Di samdān sewi che la dini ki samdādi dini di samdān sane dini ngānsu sosu rānāng da tarpa togo sambe da simjian tamchegi da je tuku marita sosu rānāng tarpa togo sambe samdān na dini kon temengi nyandu na rāngi lamli ya lobsang che kuchu kore. Da dini dangbo dini sosu gāng liya du se samdān dini samdān che dini 누구신 약부지 롤이야다 되니기 탈바 토요 받아 되니 약부 하고 고요도 근데 약부 장요도 로 장사를 제라 다파 오다 랑세 지그레 현세의 심전 탐제레 랑세 현세의 랑나진 대화 되게 찍버려 동음이 되게 찍버려 그래서 현심전 탐제의 반도 두부도 선배 삼당요도 되니 현심제의 동안 자나서 비니죠 레고 되니 뒤 잡아진 별람이야 냠는 두고 그래 그래서 데네기 소수 당보 소수 때도 데네기 den시고 남는 삼다 제버지 냠는 제디 그래서 기부지는 투모와 남이린 바시데 지다 투모 타버친 별람이린 바체 냠는 제발라 데네기 냠는 디엘이야 장고 도고로와 디야고 중반에 타버친 별람 냠는 제도 데네기 소수 때도 데네기 냠는 야고 den시네로 야고 삼다마도나现在什么大推的，现在的什么大推的，干来考过来是个。现在的那啥，当我土木来米人巴西的，来米人巴西，现在几乎跳不进来，来米人巴你们接把了，当我电信内陆什么大的，所需电路都是你们这样我讲过的是个，这是我的觉得。你们觉得跳不进来，你们觉得，但米巴的什么他们就是什么大嘛，都到几把钱了的，是吧的，东海的什么的，但这些人就所需什么大是吧的，但米巴的。태진이 심지어 탐지삼도도 태바지면 주님을 지도 삼나가를 당고서 대시고 삼던 거다 냠내셔야 돼 성직발에 이나의 미유디 심지어 탐지게 된다 삼다셔봐자 뒤로와 제자다 태바지면 주님을 제바이나 대시고 어디 삼도다 하디 냠내도 고고래 다 년도다 란지 람냠내 제바이나 대시고 삼다 냠내 제바도 고고래 제자 대시인에서 신바디 태진당 년도에다 람수 냠는 제바이나 대신 내수 신바디 신고를 봐. 저 투모하래. 네가 차상하고 와야 되지. 인자 투모하세요. 되시고로 와. 투모하람 이름 말해서 대신고를 계시면 해서 두승고래. 얘네자 뒷배마세 계시모를 차고래. 제가 니네 해서 dimba godin lamde tampo susurana de deni ke samdane deni susurana ngana thabo thogu sambeina te susunya nyelamna ranyelamna susu 랑 소소라나 타바 토고 선배 냠는 제도 되네 년들람 나란이람 그거로 봐. 대지 지에데 당보 진시고 삼다 동안 된바 삼다 공주에 된바 삼 고된 삼다 남된 삼다 요도 되는 니수도 하고 해도 당아 타바 토고도 선배 당아랑 타 sem자 탐제 제마다 소소라나 타바 토고 선배 다 람냠는 제고 고주요도 다 년들람 나란이람 그거래. 다 되네게 견삼 될래 되네 약고 하고 요도 소소 대신에서 약고 하고 요도 어다랑 지그래 현심제 탐제래 다 현래 파도를 랑나 현직바를 봐 현심제 탐제래야 농아 자고 선배 삼당이도 다디 대시 소소기 농아의 삼단 소소지부된 삼다를 봐 대미버 카버시 심제 탐제 지부지게 아래서 삼다주 도시를 삼다되는 심제 탐제 농아 자고 선배 삼당이도 대 뭐 타바침배 남냠네 좀 봐두고래 제자디 당보 삼다에 로장에 당보에 소수 때도 동아 된바 군주 된바 삼다 되는 거한테 남는 삼 로장 더 로장에 로장 체외제라 단년도에 남는 소수 지부 타바 토구에 sem자 탐지 돈도 지구도 세대 되네 남간에 가가 자줘야 로다
이것은 내가 소개했잖아 데이터가 고pen 노드 자와 양주 심바나 데드로에랑 강인 양주랑 제자들 고된 토구를 선배도 고된 간에서 토구를 했을 때 남된 공부를 토구를 해서 이래로 하다. 담보로 제자다 고된 간에 토구를 선배다 남된 공부는 토구도 선배. 다 되는 인수도 하고 요도 차상 림바 하고 요도 다 소수기 sem자 탐지게 되는 제마도 소수지부도 나자야지 태만이 남냠는지. 다 sem자 탐지게 삼당 인지 첨부 삼 다들 다 sem자 탐지 동안 자고 선배 담에도 태바집에 남냠는지. 제자 디 타바치마 투모를 남이린 바에 타바치마 쉐님을 제발로 원조에 최고래 무시 타바치마 쉐님을 제발 니를 디 장고或者 원조세 니를 장고에 디 차고 원조에 최고래 The point just made is that these meditations are largely analytical. We could say for our purposes, they're all analytical. A further point to make, and this was mentioned last night as well, these meditations need to be done in relation to your own situation. Your own situation, your own lived experience. You meditate on your own 5 aggregates, coming to recognize how your own 5 aggregates are in the nature of suffering, how you yourself are drowning in this ocean of suffering. And you do this meditation in relation to your own situation, in relation to the true sufferings, true origins, true cessations, and true paths. The meditation is focused on oneself. Now, I'm emphasizing this point because we are here in the context, the broader context of the Mahayana Dharma, and many of you will have an interest in, a yearning towards the Mahayana. But here the meditations are in relation to yourself. And the meditations remain in relation to yourself for a substantial period, or in fact you could almost say the entirety of one's meditations on the Four Noble Truths. So you meditate on suffering in relation to yourself, leading to that wish, I don't want to suffer. I use the words in the book. If only I had achieved cessation, the pacification of suffering. So it's in relation to oneself. What is the origin then of my suffering? Then one comes to recognize the origin of my own suffering is my own ignorance of self-grasping. Still staying with oneself. Can I eradicate that self-grasping? can I cease my ignorance of self-grasping, giving rise to the thought, I must actualize cessation. This is all in relation to oneself. I must gain freedom from suffering. I must actualize cessation, all in relation to oneself. What is the path that I can get liberated from suffering? So again, I'm emphasizing this meditation is about oneself. What is the path by which I can gain liberation? So here, when we get to true paths, here one makes comes to a point where one is wanting to continue in the paths of the Mahayana or stay on the paths of the hero and solitary realizer. There is a decision to be made. Up to this point, one is meditating in relation solely to oneself. When one gets to true paths, one can, again, in your own meditation, you can do meditations here on emptiness and generosity and so forth, on those paths. But it is in the section on true paths that one, if one's inclination is to the Mahayana, that one then stops and reminds oneself, all beings are in the same situation as me. I've given rise to a wish for my cessation, but I am still trapped in suffering, in this ocean of suffering. That is the situation of all beings. And then one can, at this point, go into the paths of the Mahayana, or the trainings of the Mahayana. So what the point that I'm making in this section is this meditation is how one gives rise to actual compassion. It is the preliminary practice to give rise to compassion. If one starts out meditating on the Four Noble Truths in relation to others, one will not give rise to the Four Noble Truths. One will not give rise to actual compassion. Our self-cherishing is very strong. We need to recognize the suffering that I cannot take this anymore. I have to gain freedom. And when we have this determined attitude, it says at the top of the page, when you commit yourself, or you vow, you commit yourself to actualize the cessation that puts an end to suffering. Thereafter, when one is seeking out the path, then one can lift one's gaze to the actual situation of others. But until then, these are the trainings shared with a practitioner of intermediate capacity. And they are shared because they are the preliminary practice for a Mahayanist. They have to be cultivated. So the trainings we've looked up to this point, the training shared with the practitioner of initial capacity, they were the trainings to give us a focus beyond this life. Those were the preliminaries to come to this. And these are the preliminaries to come to the trainings of a practitioner of greatest capacity. So I hope this is clear. These meditations need to be done in relation to one's own lived experience in order to give rise to a determined attitude. I must actualize cessation. Then one is ready to lift one's gaze to the situation of others. So that brings us to a conclusion for not just today, but for our entire year. So now what we've covered here in these 3 sessions this weekend is something really of great importance. So I hope, because we've gone slowly, it's abundantly clear. It's really been an excellent year together. I'm really very pleased with what we've covered here and how we've covered it. And now we come to dedicate all this merit that we've accumulated over this, our 3rd year, looking at this wonderful text.
Loti nala samtawe na dosine lamrim lobsang da Bendigo tusit ba go jure jesa kasa shubana jin da junju nala ya da judi ne nya bar shindo ka kiwi tunjin dubar anjuwala ane gaje ndela phamba maru ne chide ya da jowa kala jur subana jin junju nala 가상 괜히 더 수수하대 단주 되는 예벌 신도가 제사다는 저기 단주 밀리리 되면 톱가와 신도 톱가와래 세델로 톱아들이야 톱는 냠내 집에 된다 계시 모두 두고래 제사다 세델이야 냠내 제와 계시 모래 마제바이나 마오바나 되니게电상보 톱도에 갈래 하고래 세지 제름시도 가서 준주나나 Geshe 집에 소마 나시 당하는 저거 다 로직이 되니게다 소수기 아주 후다바다 지는 냠매제 도시네 친인제 고급라래 개와 바도메가 사요래 배야고래 제수 일하시야래
Really speaking, honestly, I'm really pleased with everyone's endeavors this year. Pleased with your endeavors to hear these teachings, reflect on these teachings. This is the most excellent way to live one's life. So 3 years ago when we started this text, we also started Shantideva's Bodhisattva's Way of Life on Wednesday evenings. There, I just want to call you back to the fourth verse. These freedoms and endowments of this precious human rebirth, these freedoms and endowments so difficult to attain can fulfill the purpose of beings. If I do not accomplish this life's potential, when could such an excellent opportunity be achieved again? So in the time that you spend here hearing these teachings, thinking about their meaning, this is fulfilling this life's potential. To the extent that you cultivate them within, you're taking yourself ever closer to be able to fulfill the purpose of beings, in other words, to fulfill their needs too. This is making the most excellent use of this incredible opportunity.
Dene chowa yewe na jigo mara delia ane jigi diri jehen de lega lehan momu gugore dene lega lehan da dene yewe na jigo mara chu ane chu sheken gugore chu sheken yewe na jigo mara chu nyengen gugore jisa chu nyengen mena ane she lag mara she yewe na she lag mara jisa da diya ji nyengen yewe na sheken mena na she lag ma nyengen ro ya mara jisa dene zanga zu tunge ma sona da 지 초사다 델레데리 제간다 데니게 최년간다 안데 최시간다 차상지 고고를 대자되는 아주 두시 고반하진 아주데 삼다만 튕긴 푸는 소바데 배 중요해 배하고래 제자다 서브림시기 데니게 라마이셔다 서브림시 공부 시에제 두신들이 나 최소수 데니제 안데르야 아주게 내려가려간다 아주데 안지기 녀만에 다대바도 아주게 레제바 먹고 중요해 안다디 내가 샤웨 내가 저기다 저어데 내가 내가 나디디 저기 지게 초소 차고래 된 SPC다 되게 안디 이제 안데리아 고치지간 안다라 내가 량배 먹고를 제수 빼면서 야후래 땅을 저 판도 침부 중에 아주 최신의 제다 고배 야고다 제수 샤산에 매 안디 가제레 레제다 되게 다라 통해다 되리아 내가 저기 곰튀게라서 받아 되게 먹고지가 샤산을 빼 지게 저기 tunkyuriyabu charita chu nyankai dili ngusu pegari da ngusu pegmene da dhagya tuli nyankai digi nganzu liya dinigi yabu shu chari dini za pe yabu chungwari chizan nganzu chu xie nga ngay dini ma ilamila xie rawa diya chungwazu dhiri jigen ri nyankai di ngusu yungan diri ane dhagto di nyankai di chazangi toni ane ji xie ashirago ri pe masi yabu chungwari gadin je xue yi
You mentioned earlier, but that Buddhism has a unique presentation of view. And if we look at the view of Buddhism, it's that of dependence arising. That we can have been able to come together comes about independence on an innumerable number of causes. So just to talk about some of the most obvious ones, for us to come together and have spent this year together, some of the causes required is that firstly there needed to be a place to come. This Dharma center needed to have been built. The fundraising for it initially needed to be built, and it needed to have been maintained continuously over the 40 or so years that it has been here. But merely having a building, a ground, a place, that alone is insufficient. One needs people who have an interest in hearing teachings. So one needs people who want to hear and understand the Dharma. But merely having people who want to understand the Dharma is insufficient. We also require someone who can explain the Dharma. So a teacher as well as students is required. Here I just want to really emphasize that there can only be a teacher if there are students. And likewise, someone can only be a teacher if there is students. Or someone can only be a student if there is a teacher. There is this deep interdependent relationship between all of us. And this interdependent relationship goes very broad. Other obvious people involved are those great and inspiring beings whose qualities led to the inspiration that led to our sense of being established and then sustained. Here we're thinking of Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa, who inspired so many students around the world. And through their inspiration and through the gathering together of students, this place has been maintained and developed for now several decades. And here, just talking about those who currently bear the burden of responsibility, such as Andy, the director, and Venerable Lawang as the SPC, and Venerable Tsepel, who leads you in meditations and so forth. You, as well as many other volunteers and permanent staff, all help make this possible. And we are all dependent on you. Because of the work that you do, students can come. And because of the work you do, the teacher can come. So we are all entwined karmically in this way. We have this deeply entwined, interdependent relationship. And then to speak directly from my side, I want to say a thank you to everyone. So those who are here in presence, in person, whether students and staff, as well as those watching from home. It's in dependence on all of you that I have this opportunity to teach. If it wasn't for these collections of people, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have this opportunity to share what independence on another set of courses I can now present. So I really want to say from my side that I appreciate all of you and thank you.
Chik kukore, chesan dine kiyu kukore, chesan kiyu pe honga zulia, kiyu yawa yu devare, chesan kiyu tone, dine ki tone pe masi chik kiyu gyuyare, andi maje, andi ngale ya Geshe liya roba cheya tang, dine ki tungin chik pe pando chimbo tu, chesan dine zang pe masi kirin chimbo re, nga zu dine ki nga zulia, cheso yawa yu ba, dele ya lega lega tang, chik tungin cheya tang, an chue nyinga yawa yu ba, and the Delia Giusia Yahweh, Bear Yahweh Tunye, or some day, Bear Yahweh to share.
Furthermore, as you all know, my English is, whilst it's come on a little bit, it hasn't come on much. And so I am entirely dependent on a translator in order to be able to communicate the Dharma. Without a translator, I really could not say very much. So there's a further need of dependency. And for us to be here, cost something, so you all contribute to that, and our conditions here in the Dharma Center and our living conditions, all is very comfortable, and enables enables me to have the time and space to be able to cultivate the causes required to be able to share with you hopefully in a way that is impactful. So I just want to, again, further express my thanks to everyone present, because all of you in your own ways make this experience possible.
이내 야고를 안내자산다 야고 안에 간주자산 자산 야고를 자산 간주 대선 시가 튜브에 되게 튜브에 빼야고래 제자데 안주기 튜브에 있는 대화에서 튜브 중에 대화 연구에서 제자데 안주 디레 튜브에 달로 하고도 안주기 되게 토네 안주기 지리는 버체 패야라서 받아 네 지 자도름지 폐지 가지고 송쇼시야 되네 거 빼야 버려서 가서 가와상 보라 말이 제가 나 되네기 아주 최냐면 제 롭종 제 당한주도 신의 준죽제야 다 람림 냠내제 진짜 도스 냠내제데 저버리 미치기 미유 코롱티 최소 주야디 되네기 아주 롭종 제 아주 냠내제 발때네 아니야 안 타르베 탐지케베 도에 미유디레 겨울음 지게 미유디레 산에 좀 내되게 미유디레 제가 되네 예산 아주 도시네냐 즉 아주 롭종 아주 도시 해바디 다 수섬다나 아주 저버리 미치기 공부 나중 공부 두고 오래 네 겨울지고 공부 두고 오래 상해 좀 내디고 공부 두고 오래 가서 두고 오래 다 빼야고 있다 가서 두셔야 돼 근데 제가 디제 투바 된 가지고 가고 고미야래 제가 다 된 가지고 라마다 상jel이야 두비 쳐봐래 가지고 두셔야 돼 두비 쳐봐래 쳐봐는 쳐도 교봐도 두비 쳐봐 인서 제가 가서 두셔 빼야고 인사 라마를 두비 쳐봐 인 제가 서브르미체다 라메시 건주기 미유 나신 지가 두고에서 비게 두시리 텐더 두고 오래 데네시 소소라 지수 이란제 날라메게 가두고에서 라마레 대바체다 라메 가두게디 이스비다 소소게 두세 가오 고미야데 게라 지수 이란 초동아 세데 소 랑게 생기 개와제발레 지수 이란 고미야 랑게 개와제발레 지수 이란 고미야 두체네 라메게 두체네 라마 서버미체라서 두스투와 빼 나들이 진침보 그린침보레서 라메 그린제 do something to go about me by side, just I do something over it, pay up with it.
This year, we've seen the culmination of the fourth of the four entities here in the nunnery, its construction being completed. And something that I really recognize is of the four entities, the nunnery, Atisha Center, the Great Stupa, and the monastery, all four are living together in harmony within each entity between the four entities. The relationships are really quite excellent. And when we are in harmony with others, we are happy. And we also have less obstacles to fulfilling what is important. And this year, many important things have been achieved in terms of the teachings that have been given and received and cultivated within, and the teachings that were given by Linga Rinpoche and later by Jado Rinpoche. It's truly been a year of great benefit. And one can have confidence that the great beings in our world, whether Buddha Shakyamuni, His Holiness, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and all others, aware of what we are individually and collectively doing here, will bring great joy to them. Because why did Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche encourage the establishment of Dharma centers? It was so that students can hear the correct and unmistaken teachings and be guided in cultivating them within, and then actually do so. And all of you have been doing that. You've been coming to teachings, hearing the unmistaken teachings, and cultivating them within. Therefore, your endeavors here are fulfilling the wishes of your teachers. Whichever teachers you are most drawn towards, they are delighted at the endeavors you make. Because the very purpose of them being in our world, the purpose of them encouraging the establishment and maintenance of places such as this, is so that beings can gain lasting happiness, gain freedom from suffering. And I know all of you have a deep appreciation for the kindness of the great beings that you have encountered in this life. And the way they want that kindness repaid is through you cultivating the qualities of the Dharma within. And by coming here, or watching from home, hearing the teachings, reflecting on the teachings, this is fulfilling their heart wish. This is the way they want, this is what they want from you, that the Dharma comes to arise within you.
도시네 당주기다 지기 아주디 최소하게 안내 건바 안주 건배견시 단 잠바다 안내 아주 최소하게 가서 최딩기 견시 잉진라서 바다 안주디 안견시 안디 멤버 아주 최소하게 보드 멤버라서 바디네기다 지게 줘서 되게 자산 빼야 버려. 하는 거죠. 아니 건봐. 얘는 제가 라바도 뒤 움세제야래. 아니 membe기다 참치야래. 내가 멍보래. 당은도 아니 건비고라도 내가 요 만도 줘서야 판도 빼야 버려. 재산 되네 달라 내가 통한 빼 재산 야고래. 당아도 빼 유용하데 심유도 되야돼. 아니 되게 소수인데 심유 안에 제가 강함에 되게 배기우도 아니 대인자다 라와도가 로레로 딱바를 스캬를 바고 세트야라 그거래 대수 차사 안지게 경화적이 다치 대 로트 쇼라도 튕기기 토안에 나디 줘야라 그거지 배배서 깨진지 뭐이 세상이 차사를 안 투시해 쉬어야 아니 라와도 기교 yeah he translated may little bit speak English in his English may practice he is very good translator yeah he's very helpful me, and he takes me to see doctor. Then he buy my foods. Then sometimes he take to Melbourne and eco leg. Then he take to an airport. Tomorrow he will take to it at the airport, and he is very helpful me. Then I ask. Whatever time I will go, Bendigo, then he never said no. He accept. It's very good. It's made translation is very important. It's sometimes translator and Geshe is not good relation. Then it's not good. It's very good. Yeah. Thank you. Alright, that is the dang yeah.
So before Geshe embarrassed me, he then he said the following. So all of you, I encourage you now to turn your mind to the people here who make everything possible. The current people here who make everything possible. There are those in the past, but to talk about those who are here now. And I don't know everyone by name, so I can only talk a bit generally. But if you think about those who take the burden of responsibility for each of the entities. So we have Venerable Sepul from the nunnery, we have Venerable Jumper at the monastery, we have Andy here and Ian Green at the stupa. So they bear the burden of responsibility with some support from their board and a lot of support by their various people around them. So in terms of the Dharma Center here, there's Venerable Hawang, the SBC and many others. So and also then, and not just those who work full-time, but there are those who offer themselves on a voluntary basis or a time-to-time basis. There are so many different people who make this place possible. And there are also those, often the same people, who don't only give time and expertise, but who support financially. And this is also greatly needed. So rejoice in the broad community of people who come together and make this place possible. And I particularly want to mention Venerable Sepul, who's carried the burden of the nunnery for some years, and also at the same time has contributed so much to the Dharma Center and enabled me to lead retreats and other events here. Because she is our umse, she's our retreat leader, and she's done so much for not just the nunnery, but our Atisha Center. So a particular thank you to her. And then lastly, I just want to say that when I look at the situation, the broader situation of the four entities, I'm very happy with how things are. We live in harmony, and this really, for me, is a sign of how good things are here now. So a big thank you to everyone, and I encourage you to recognize this too, because all too easily we take these things for granted, we see them as ordinary, when they are really quite remarkable. And then also just to say, tomorrow I'm going to India, as I do every single year, and I can only go to India because of your financial kindness, that you as students give the money required so that I can get a ticket and I can go every year and I can see my students return to my home monastery. So I just want to also say thank you for giving me that again.
다 지게 점밀이야 안에 네마 네야 네모 축수에 탐지 신의 점밀 찾아 시디 용화 쇼쇼서다 안능아 저기다 네 최소들이 안내직 먼저 대상 공부에 안내 대상에 최대의 자산 안능아 저기다 대니기 자와 내가 최대 튠비기 자와라 내가 가르는 자와람로 야고 용화 쇼서다 개와딜래 되네 되네요 안능아 저기네 대니기 다 최선 냠는지네 안내 냠는지 야고 용화 쇼서 삼다야다 언디마제 아주게 개와 사셔바들래 되네 접주 나슬람 세버르미치 양시 뉴르도 폐제 나마 나신제네 아니 지도시네 야고 중앙정아주야 안지 라면서네 최슈야 고급 아니 도시네 요거라고 쇼세 되네 이게 좀 말음제래 당도
In a few minutes, then Venerable Tsepel will lead us in the final dedication prayers. So when we come to dedicate in accordance with the meaning of the words, and as well as hold in your heart all beings throughout the world, those seen beings and unseen beings. Give rise to the wish, through this dedication of merit, may this virtue ripen in their experience so that beings come to experience deep and lasting inner peace, and that they can abide in harmony with those around them. May there be no more inner conflict, no more conflict within homes or communities or between nations. May beings abide in peace. May all virtuous activities for ourselves as individuals, as these four entities here, and all people and organizations wanting to do good in the world, may all their virtuous endeavors be fulfilled and successful quickly. May all those who are striving to transform their minds in virtuous ways, may they be quickly successful. And may even those who haven't given rise to such a thought, may through this dedication of merit, such a yearning arise within them and they meet the required conditions. May all the holy beings in the world, through this dedication of merit, may they remain amongst us. And may the reincarnation of Lama Zopa, may he turn out to be excellent, just like the previous great master.
안디마제 나는 저기 최소한 저의 비게다 되니게 나스 네바로시아 예바인 네바 용거래 님의 비게다 최소 저 메바이네 최소의 저 예바시다 아주 최소가 공기 미로 흉으로와 최소 저의 비게 네바로시다 님의 비게다 지단에 점례나리아 네바 먹고 맨주시게 찾아나다 맨주되게 람로 야고 네 뉴도 타제 아니 맨주다 람로 야고 용하다 네 뉴도 타와 쇼어스 베다 뭐놈제 타마르 되네시.
And then lastly, dedicate that all those who are connected with this Dharma center directly, such as those here, indirectly, in even those further afield, and certainly not just, and those unconnected with our Dharma center, all beings, may their temporary needs be fulfilled. If they're experiencing illness, may their illness heal. If they're suffering, may they gain freedom from that suffering. May the temporary needs of all beings, whatever they are, may they be fulfilled. And on this basis, may beings come to strive to cultivate the causes for lasting happiness. So thank you then. Thank you.
I just want to say a few words on behalf of Lama's asked me to say a few words on behalf of everyone. I think Geshe, you're very, very kind the way that you explain your position here, just all those dependent arisings and the need for the students and all the conditions to come together. But I think on behalf of the students, both online and here, those that come regularly as well as those that come occasionally, I think as time's gone on, you've really shown an enormous amount of patience and trust and guidance for us all, and not in a way that you've done it in a way that is very compatible with our culture and where we've come from, such that your teachings are really hitting home so much for all of us. We hear when we talk with each other just different things that people have got that are very valuable, and also show in the Dharma is quite familiar, but then how do you actually transform your mind and your own the way that you've achieved your position to be able to teach us like this is really quite extraordinary. But then your teachings give us these little insights of, oh, you must have thought like this, you must have thought like that. So it's very helpful and very amazing to be able to receive your teachings. And I think we're so very lucky. I feel that I myself, and I'm sure many of us, are really rejoicing whatever causes we created to be able to be here and to hear your teachings. It's incredibly valuable. And also with Dorje's incredible relationship, that we can see the harmony, and we can also see, really understand Dorje very, very well. I'm surprised that the other centres are sort of sometimes wishing that they had Dorje as well. At Geshe, I don't want to be too long, but it's just really encouraging your stability here, and that your intention to come back and continue to help us. When I know you have many, you've shared with us the young monks that you're fathering, and some relatives too that you're helping in a very good way, and you have many students I know at the monastery, and also Geshe friends and your own teachers. But the fact that you're coming so far away to Australia and happy to put down roots here, I really pray that all your prayers become quickly fulfilled, and that if we can continue to create whatever causes we may to have this opportunity with you, that we can make many, many more conditions to have this opportunity. So please travel well and safely.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.